Good afternoon, everyone. I have known Father Daniel Lord for nearly 30 years, but I've always admired him and wondered at his tremendous talent. A devout priest of the Jesuit order and a man who could have been a national figure as a producer of theatrical enterprises on Broadway or in Hollywood. A little over 5 months ago, word came from a St. Louis hospital that Father Lord had cancer of the lung with no hope for his recovery. It's difficult to know just how to begin this interview, but if Father Lord's understanding, if his attitude and philosophy toward his situation will help someone else who is similarly afflicted, then this half hour should be worthwhile. Father Lord, I'm sitting here watching the clock, and we have 28 minutes, and I'll just hold up my hand as the clock goes around.
I'm glad you're watching the clock, because I've stopped watching the clock for quite a while now. You see, you begin to think in terms of unlimited time and unlimited eternity.
When did you first get this? You had cancer of the lung, and that, well, you just wasn't any way to fix it.
I got that news in January. I have had, for the last few years, 2 very wonderful doctors, and they were treating me for what I thought was something else. Then they walked into the room one day after a series of examinations, and I could see from the look in their eye they wanted to break something to me, you know, a little funereal. So I told them to go right ahead, that it wasn't going to be any surprise to me, and they told me. The joke of it is that I've had cancer for about 6 years. I had cancer of the bladder, and I didn't know I had it. They were able to take care of that and keep me in perfect working order for 6 years, so when this next one came along, the one that the people are interested in, it was really a secondary cancer and not the primary. Well, I have had it for 6 years.
Of course, you have another lung.
Yes, but this isn't both of them.
This isn't both?
Oh, yes. I've got both, Scott.
This question of cancer, Father Lord, and that's why I've asked you to visit on In Our Opinion today. It's been forcibly brought to the attention of people, I think, in the last few years. We've had all sorts of warnings, campaigns, and I think some people have developed a fear complex. What is your attitude toward this fear complex that some people have as they read and listen to the symptoms?
I've congratulated the newspapers on having done a very wonderful job. It seems to me that this national campaign to make people aware of the fact that there is a thing called cancer, that is very far from being the most terrible of evils, has done a great deal of good. Time was when a man got the sentence of cancer and he ran like mad to hide himself away. That was the end. If a woman suspected that she had cancer, the last thing in the world she wanted to do was to be told positively she had it. She'd avoid the doctor. She wouldn't have an examination. She'd see a small lump of some sort and say, I guess it's cancer. Instead of having taken care of, she ran. Now she's afraid. And I think it's a very wholesome fear. Remember the old expression, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom? Well, maybe the fear of cancer is one of the beginnings of health. And an enormous campaign means that, well, I used to have a funny experience when I was at St. John's Hospital in St. Louis, where I was being treated. Across the street from me was the big St. Louis Cancer Research Institute. And I used to look across at them and say, get busy, boys, get going for me. And I think that's the way a lot of people feel about it now. We're so glad that we're afraid, and they're so glad so many people are working.
Well, you know, you look awfully good this morning, sitting opposite me here.
Thank you.
Look rosy and full of pep and life, and it's hard to realize, Father Lord, that you have this virulent disease that's frightening and taking away so many people. There are many types of cancer. You've had it. I suppose you've become quite an expert on cancer.
Like anything else, I got curious about it. I don't believe in amateur doctors. And I think there are too many people who are pretending to be doctors and practicing medicine without a license. So I never pretend to talk professionally on a subject like this, but as a matter of fact, as soon as I found I had it, I began to read up on it and to talk to the doctors, chiefly to talk to the doctors. My first question when I was told I had it was naturally, how long? And that led to the first discovery, which I think was very reassuring. They said, we haven't the slightest idea. And I was puzzled by that. I think doctors are infallible, you know. I have a great belief in them. They're wonderful people. And I said, you mean you can't tell me? And they said, no. Might be 6 months. Might be 6 years. You might slip in the bathtub and be killed that way. So I said, well, what's the difference between the various types? And they said it all depends upon your reaction to the speed of what they call the wild cell. In a young person, that wild cell may move very fast. In an old person like yourself, it may move quite slowly. So they say we have had cases of people who have come in here. 6 months later, they come back, and there's absolutely no sign of what was a very clear cancer in the first instance. Sometimes the healthy cells build up a wall around it, buttress it in. The healthy cells get to work, and they seem to isolate it. It will stay that way for years. So anyone who predicts on a case like this, I think, is making a very rash statement. And the doctors won't make it. So anyone with cancer can just say to himself, I know I'm going to die someday. So do we all. I have the warning that this is a particular type of disease. That's a blessing. It's nice to know what you've got the matter with you. And as far as time is concerned, no one knows.
Perhaps your philosophy of life, Father, has, perhaps I can say, has increased your span of life, the attitude you take toward it. Other people similarly afflicted, having given the same information you've been given, might greatly accelerate the disease by their worries.
Oh, you can.
Is that possible?
I don't think there's any doubt about it. The most interesting thing the doctors tell me nowadays is the growth of interest in this whole matter of psychosomatic medicine, the relation of your mind to your body and your body to your mind. And when I asked them what I was supposed to do, once I knew that I had the trouble, the cancer, they said, well, keep cheerful, keep just as much in your normal life as you can, and that's the biggest help we can get. That's more important than medicines or anything else. When people collapse under it, when they take the attitude of, oh, well, this is the end, and throw up the sponge and quit, it's very likely to be the end. And the sponge is up, and they do quit. But if you keep at your work and you keep cheerful, yes, I think there's a lot to it. We had an old story among the Jesuits, which I think some of you may have heard, about how under certain circumstances, St. Ignatius was playing billiards. He's the founder of the Jesuits, with some of his associates. And one of them said, if you knew in 15 minutes' time that you were going to die, what would you do? Well, the men around the billiard table, one of them would get down on his knees and pray, and another one would go to confession, another one would balance his accounts, and Ignatius said, I'd finish the billiard game. And I think that's the answer. Finish your billiard game, if that's what you're playing.
I suppose you've had many letters from all over the country since this announcement came out.
Oh, people have been wonderfully good. This is one of the times when you really get to know, George, the goodness of people. I have had literally thousands of people who have taken the trouble to write to me. Some of them were people that I'd known when I was 6 years old. Grandmothers have written to me and said, I used to play with you when you were 5 years old, and I was 4, back on Vincennes Avenue in Chicago. I've gotten letters from people I haven't heard of for 50 years, 60 years. And then, of course, these wonderful letters from friends, and oddly enough, this tremendous number of letters from people I've never heard of.